So we're going to focus on what happens in labor. What's the big picture of what's happening behind the scenes inside of your body? And the reason for knowing this is not because you're going to become a scientist who understands childbirth. It's because when you're having the experience of giving birth, knowing what's actually happening is incredibly helpful for you to be able to understand why it feels the way it feels. It's also incredibly helpful in your ability to plan for what's going to work best for you. So this is really basic information. I'm not going to tell you anything that I don't think you need to know. And this all this information builds on itself so that you get to the place where you feel like you have what you need to have a beautiful birth. So the first thing about childbirth is there are 3 stages of childbirth. And the first stage is the opening phase, where basically your body goes from your uterus being tightly closed. The cervix is the opening to the uterus, and it is tightly closed. Those muscles are incredibly strong, thank goodness, right? Because they hold that baby in for 9 months. We're grateful for that. But during the course of the first stage, they go from being closed to being open to 10 centimeters, about the size of a bagel. So, and some mamas have their uterus start to open a little bit in the weeks leading up to childbirth. Not everyone, but some mamas have that, and that's completely normal for your body to start loosening up ahead of time. So that's the first stage. The second stage, now that the cervix is completely out of the way and there's nothing blocking the exit of the uterus, the second stage is baby going from being inside to the uterus, moving through the birth canal, and at the end of the second stage, you are holding your baby in your arms. Your baby has now been born. So why is there a third stage? Because you still need to birth the placenta. And the placenta is very important. It's been feeding your baby this entire pregnancy. And once you've birthed the placenta, which is a piece of cake, but it's a very important part, you are officially no longer pregnant. So we're going to talk about these 3 stages. And the rule of thumb is that during this process of these 3 stages, your uterus is contracting, right? The first part of the way the uterus contracts is causing it to open. And then in the second stage, the way that it contracts changes and it causes it to push your baby through the birth canal. But those contractions tend to, this is the rule of thumb, be between 30 and 90 seconds. So 30 and 90 seconds, and you get a break. 30, 90 seconds, you get a break. And I remember hearing this when I was pregnant. I mean, I knew it before, but hearing it when I was pregnant, I was just like, oh my God, that's the best news ever. You mean when a mama's talking about being in labor for 12 hours, she's not in contraction for 12 hours? You get a break? Yes. So on average, a 12-hour labor, mom is in contraction for 2 of those hours. So think about that. You can do things for 2 hours that are much more difficult to do for 12 hours. And you can do things that are broken up into bite-sized pieces much more easily than doing them all at once. So this is amazingly excellent news. Mother Nature has made this manageable. So the next rule of thumb is that contractions tend to, during the course of labor, get longer, get stronger, and get closer together. So longer, stronger, closer together. What longer means is that at the beginning of labor, you're much more likely to be having those 30-second contractions. And as labor progresses, you're more likely to be having the 90-second contractions as you get to 10 centimeters dilated and pushing your baby out. There are no guarantees in this. It's not like there's a have to in this, but that's the tendency, is that happens. Stronger means that your body's contractions are more gentle at the beginning of labor and they get more intense as it goes. So the way I think about that is at the very beginning of labor, it's like your body is picking up the 2-pound weights. And as you progress in labor, your body is picking up the 25-pound weights, right? Like your body is actually working harder as labor goes on. And so understanding why this matters there's a hormone called oxytocin, which makes things contract. And when you start labor, well, oxytocin is the reason you start labor. That's part of what is released into your body when labor begins and your contractions actually start. And as you go through labor, your level of oxytocin just increases in your body. So that hormone is building up over the course of labor. Therefore, your contractions are getting stronger as your body has more and more of this perfect hormone to help you get through labor. So it increases over time. There's another hormone that's really important. We're just going to talk about two of them, even though there's a symphony of hormones happening in your body when you're giving birth. But these are the two that you need to know about. So we've got the oxytocin, and now we're going to talk about endorphins. And endorphins are pain receptor blockers. It's your body's natural morphine. And endorphins also slowly build up during the course of your labor. We're maybe familiar with endorphins from when people talk about running a marathon, where maybe at mile 20 of the 26 miles, their back's starting to hurt, their legs and their feet hurt. Like they're thinking, oh my God, I don't know if I can go another 6 miles. And then somewhere along the way, all of a sudden their body dumps a bunch of endorphins, and now they've got a little pep in their step and they feel so much better. Like the pain that they were starting to experience just goes away. Well, that is what happens in labor. It just happens in a little bit more of a slow buildup, which matches the buildup of oxytocin. So as your contractions are getting stronger, the endorphins are making it so that it's more manageable. So that's an important piece. The other is closer together. So I don't want to forget that. You're initially in labor, maybe having these short contractions, maybe they're 30 seconds long, and you're sitting there for 5 minutes before you feel another one, right? I always think, don't start counting labor until you have to, right? You can just ignore it and be going about your day until you have to stop what you're doing to get through the contraction. I remember doing dishes and having to stop doing the dishes and close my eyes. And I was like, okay, well, I was having contractions before, but now I actually think like, yeah, I think I'm pretty sure I'm in labor. So that shift goes from having these long breaks and these short contractions, and then the contractions get longer as you go, and the break in between gets shorter. So maybe at the end, you're having these 90-second contractions that are very strong, and you're having a 30-second break, and then you're going again. But the break is consistently happening throughout. That's really important to know. So, but going back to endorphins, your endorphins are making this whole process manageable. Mother Nature has made this possible, right? She's made it so that this is okay for us to get through. We can actually do this. So then why are 85% of women having epidurals in our culture? That's the last statistic I heard, 85% of women. So what that means is that their discomfort is outweighing their experience, right? They feel like it's unmanageable at some point, or maybe they've just planned to have an epidural. But let's focus on what happens that makes it so that our endorphins don't keep up with our oxytocin and don't allow us to get through this process in a manageable way. And there are a couple of things, and one is when a stressful event happens. So everything is manageable in labor until there's some kind of stressful event. And so we're going to talk about a few different ones. And one stressful event could just be the fear of labor itself, right? If you have been raised in this culture, most likely you've been told negative stories from the time you were small. And when you think about labor, you feel stressed, and therefore you're anticipating that this is going to be a hard event. Now you're suddenly in labor and you're stressed. So having stress hormones make it so that you are unable to have the same endorphin release. So if we have endorphins being released in our body to help us manage these increasingly strong, closer together contractions, why are 85% of women having epidurals in our culture? Well, I point the big finger at another hormone that is happening in our bodies when we're in labor. And those hormones are catecholamines. They are stress hormones. And when our body releases catecholamines, they block our body's ability to release endorphins. What does that mean? It means that when a stressful event happens, all of a sudden we're not getting our body's natural morphine. And instead, we're tensing up and our body isn't releasing endorphins anymore. So suddenly there's a gap between the oxytocin in your system that's making everything stronger and your endorphins that are now no longer, matching where you are in labor. There's a gap, and suddenly labor can feel unmanageable. So the reason to talk about this is for planning. You want to be able to plan to try to make this all manageable and plan in advance for a stressful event that could happen, that could, put you into this gap where suddenly taking medication seems like a good idea. So one stressful event is being scared of labor. So if a mama is scared of labor when she goes into labor, then what that means is her body is going to release stress hormones and her body's not going to be able to release the endorphins. So you have this time while you're pregnant to work on your relationship to childbirth, to understand how your body is built to do this, literally built to do this, and get to a place of feeling at peace with your body's ability to give birth. And that will decrease the likelihood that when you go into labor, you're automatically afraid. And instead, pregnancy, the end of pregnancy can be pretty uncomfortable. And instead, we can start looking forward to giving birth. Like, finally, I'm not going to be pregnant anymore. And I'm going to get my freedom in this body back, kind of, with this baby in my arms. But very different than the end of pregnancy. So looking forward to labor is a really different way of embracing it when it comes on. Is like, woohoo, here it is. That is not going to release catecholamines in your system. But oh God, here it is. Might. So another stressful event is who will be there. So when I ask mamas sometimes, like, who's going to be there? They say, oh, well, for sure, my partner. I feel really, good about that. And my mom's going to be there, and I feel really good about that. And, my partner's mom I felt like I had to invite her because, my mom's going to be there and we don't really get along very well, but I had to. Well, that's basically a catecholamine walking in the door in the middle of your labor. And you're managing labor just fine. All of a sudden, your mother-in-law walks in the door, your body releases a bunch of catecholamines, and now there's that gap where your endorphins are no longer being released and you have stress hormones tensing you up, and suddenly this labor feels unmanageable. So that's really important to know. Like, there are literally physical reasons to not invite certain people to your labor. Anybody that brings you any amount of stress that feels like I have to, automatically, I would encourage you, like, your body is telling you, if you think about them and you tense up, your body's telling you, no, don't do that. So you have your answers, right? Your body, when you think about the people that you want to support you, it's like it relaxes and opens. So notice that difference and take it into account when you're making the decisions about how to give birth. You need to keep catecholamines in mind. Keep your stress hormones in mind, so that you can make the choices that decrease the amount of catecholamines in your body. So who's your caregiver, right? Do you feel good about that? What location are you giving birth at? Do you feel good about that, right? Making sure that you have the comfort items with you that are going to help you to feel relaxed. So, but especially like the ingredients of where you are and who you're with, the techniques that you've exposed yourself to and feel competent at, those are all things that will help you to be relaxed in labor and not have labor turn into a stressful event. There is one stressful event that is unavoidable if you plan to give birth in a hospital. And it's not because I'm discouraging you from giving birth in a hospital. I talk about this so that you can plan. So the transfer to the hospital is inherently stressful. And the reason for that is that Mother Nature did not plan for a transfer to the hospital. There was no hospital for the majority of the time human beings have been on this earth. So there's no pause button on labor. And instead, what happens is that mamas are at home where they're super comfortable with people that they're comfortable with, and they're internally focused, doing their techniques and feeling like this is all very manageable. And then they get to a place where it's time to go to the hospital, whatever reason that is, whatever time that they've decided that needs to happen. And now all of a sudden they have to be externally focused. Let's just say that you've already professionally installed your car seat. So now you're contending with being in the back seat, straddling your car seat. Maybe your partner's driving, so now they're focused on the road rather than supporting you, right? You get to the hospital and people are asking you a bunch of questions. You're being taken from room to room. There's no privacy, right? There are ingredients in all of that are just not mother friendly. And there's nothing you can do to change some of those things. What you can do is know this. So having the knowledge that your labor is most likely going to feel much more uncomfortable, much more unmanageable when you get to the hospital than when you leave home. And if you don't know that, some moms think to themselves, oh my God, give me the drugs, right? Like, thank goodness I chose a hospital birth because I don't know how anyone could manage this. But what they don't realize is what they're feeling is the gap between their oxytocin, the strength of their contractions that have increased and, labor has continued to progress, and their endorphins that have not continued to increase. So now there's this gap. Things feel unmanageable, but you're not doomed just because you have this gap. So knowing that that's why you're feeling like it's so uncomfortable, and my job is to get settled. And as soon as I'm settled, dim the lights, go back to doing the techniques that you were doing, put on some lovely music in the background, like whatever essential oils you want to bring, like have your fuzzy, blanket that you have near you. The things that are going to help you go back into an internally focused, relaxed state so that the catecholamines over the course of about 30 minutes will dissipate in your body, and your body will be able to start releasing those endorphins again, and you'll get back to a place of feeling like this is all manageable. So plan for that. And some mamas hear this information and they think, okay, I'm for sure going to go to the hospital as early as I'm allowed. And that way I'll be able to, have all this happen early on, and then I'll be settled there. Other mamas hear this exact same information and they think, okay, I'm going to go to the hospital as late in the process as possible. That way I'm not going to be, tempted to have the medication that's offered to me. And that's how I'm going to plan for this. And I love that. I love that we can get information and we are the ones who have to decide what to do with it, right? So each individual's path is a beautiful path to take. You are not doomed if you have the stressful event of going to the hospital. You just need to plan for it and give yourself some time to relax so your endorphins can catch up. So there is some information I want to tell you that is also birthing related that I think is important. This is stressful event related, and it comes from Michel Odent's book. He wrote a book called Birth Reborn that is no longer in print. And if you can get your hands on it, it's absolutely fabulous. He is an OBGYN in France, and he revamped the French hospitals to be much more mama and labor friendly. And part of how he did that was by studying animals. So he tells this story of watching a deer give birth. And the deer is all settled. She's found a place that feels safe. She's been very still and calm. And her fawn is crowning. Like Michelle O'Donnell is seeing this fawn coming out. And someone nearby steps on a stick and the stick cracks and scares this deer, who now thinks she's in imminent danger. So her body decides, no more. Fawn disappears, like sucked back up into the uterus. The deer stands up and runs until she finds another safe place. She settles down, labor starts again, and the fawn is born in this new location. And we hear this story and we think, oh my gosh, animals are so amazing. But here's the thing, we are no different. So if your body thinks you are in danger, it will stop. The fawn in that moment had the adrenaline response, right? The catecholamine dump of I'm in danger. So what happens when we're in danger? Fight, flight, or fear? Well, we're not going to fight, right? Who are you going to fight? You're in labor. But in this case, the fawn fled. But in your case, you've chosen your caregivers. You've chosen the location you're giving birth. Where are you going to go? Instead, freeze is most likely. And what that means is labor stops. The body that has been opening to 9 centimeters suddenly shuts down to 3. The baby that has been moving through the birth canal suddenly is back and not really moving. So this happens to us when we think we are in danger. And so being able to recognize what happens when our body freezes, if our body freezes, really matters. And what this is called in a hospital setting, if a woman's labor freezes, is failure to progress. FTP, failure to progress. And I beg you to not think of it as a failure, not go to the place of like, oh my God, my body is the one body that doesn't know how to give birth. No. Let's replace that F with fear, right? What just happened? What happened that made my body do what that deer's body did, right? And stop it, because it's protecting itself and its baby. So why is my body thinking I need protection, right? Did a nurse just come in offering drugs? Is there some way in which, like, I don't like the energy of this person, they're not natural birth friendly? Like, if that's the case, having your partner be the one to interface and get a new nurse, ask that they stop, intruding, whatever it is that allows you to have the space that you need. Maybe your mother-in-law just walked in and lo and behold, despite getting this information, you just had to invite her, or she just showed up. If this is what happens, then partner, needs to step in and take action and ask that person to leave. There can be other events that happen that we can't plan for or anticipate. And the reason I'm saying the birth partner addresses it is because mama's busy having a baby, right? Needs to go back to internal focus. So part of the birth partner's role is to be able to be the interface, to be able to just like leave her alone, talk to me, right? This is a wonderful reason to have a doula with you, which I will talk about later on, because having another person who can interface and be a support person is wonderful. So I have a whole list of ways of avoiding stress in labor. If feel free to put a question in the comments about any of this. I will do my best to address it. Feel free to ask me to send you this list. I would be happy to. There are so many things that we can do in planning for our labor so that we are working with our body, right? Allowing it to have all the natural support of these yummy hormones that our body is releasing to help us through this journey, and decreasing the likelihood that our body is releasing the ones that will freeze it, so that we can have the natural birth of our dreams.